Good morning and welcome to our EU-level network dialogue on guidance and standards for security by design. We are organizing this event in the framework of the SOAR Project. My name is Veronika Schröpfer and I work for the Architects Council of Europe and will be your moderator today.
So I'm going to start with some housekeeping rules. So please ensure your microphone is muted during the webinar when other people present. If you want to ask questions, you're welcome to use the chat boxes for the questions. Please also ensure your camera is off during the webinar, just to have a good transmission. And also because this event will be recorded, so if you don't feel comfortable with having your face on the recording, then please just switch off your camera. We will use Slido for an interactive part. If you're not aware, if you're not familiar with Slido, I'm going to explain it later on. But you can already open in your browser the sli.do website if you like to have a look. So the event will be recorded. I hope this is fine with everyone. And so let's make a start. Just a few words about us. So I work for the Architects Council of Europe. We are the European umbrella organization representing all architects in Europe. So at the moment, this is about 560,000 architects from 30 member states and countries in the accession countries in Europe. What we do is we represent the interests towards the EU institutions. So we do a lot of policy work and lobby work. So we're basically the single voice of the architects, and we also look at the educational and professional standards. So how do architects qualify to be architects? How is the professional mobility so that architects can, for example, graduate in France but work in Croatia? The architectural quality and the sustainability of the built environment as well. We are in the SOAR project because we look at the security by design in this project. So just to add the quality of architecture and urban design and urban fabric around places of worship in a way that worshippers feel safe to go there and to pray, but not in a sort of protected by police and so on, but really having an architectural invisible protection around them. So this is the reason why we participate in the SOAR project. So today is a special event where we want to look at guidance and standards for security by design. The idea is that we have 5 different speakers, and we're going to look at different guidelines and different countries. So what's happening in Denmark, for example, or in Hungary. We're going to start off also a little bit about the current situation in the EU, and we have some speakers from the European Commission looking at the security by design toolkit as well. So we want to look at all these issues, and this is the first of 4 events. So we also want, with the interactive part at the end, define a little bit about the content of the following events. So about the agenda of today. So this is me kicking off here. And then afterwards, Mr. Shaukat Warraich from the Enhancing Faith Institutions, the coordinator of the SOAR project, will present the SOAR project. So we're in the 2nd year of the project. So he's going to talk about the achievements we have done so far, the different pilot countries, the trainings, and so on. Afterwards, Dr. Nicoleta Mirza from EFI will speak about the current situation in the EU, what security challenges are faced by at-risk religious communities. So she's done some research in that area. And then we hand over to the European Commission, to the Joint Research Center on the EU perspective. And Mr. Schumacher and Mr. Karlos will speak about the security by design toolkit, which is in the development at the moment. Thereafter, we're going to hear Hungarian and the Danish viewpoints. So in this SOAR project, we do have architectural experts in the pilot countries, and Mr. Szabo and Mr. Scheving are 2 of our experts in Hungary and in Denmark. So they will let us know about their knowledge. And then we finish off with an interactive session where we're going to use Slido, as I said before, and we will also address here any questions that you had during the presentations to the different speakers. So I think we're gonna wrap up around 12:15, maybe 12:30. I don't know how if anybody overruns with the presentations, but I hope you stick with us, because the interactive session at the end is really where we hope to get your input for the next event. We also like to make you aware of a call for best practice examples that we are running at the moment. It's for the best architecture examples, or the built architecture examples for security by design of places of worship. The deadline is the 15th of April. Oops, sorry, the other way around. And so if any of you has an architectural practice, or your community has a place of worship that you would like to hand in as a best practice example, this is open to you. One project can be handed in by each architectural practice, and it should come with a letter of support from the community. The buildings should be completed and located in Europe. And we have set up different evaluation criteria, mainly following the Davos Declaration. And the submission material is like a 10-page document with some plans, but obviously no sensitive security information is needed for the submission. And we have set up a jury as well, which is mainly from our architectural experts, as I said before, from the different pilot countries. Yeah, so we can start now with a little interactive, just to check if you are all able to access the Slido. So if you go on Slido, sli.do, and you insert the code #SBD, security by design, or scan this QR code, just to check, so where are you based? So you are all already on the Slido website in parallel to our event. Sweden. Okay, it seems to be working. That's always a thing when you do these online events, that you think it's not going to work. Ireland, Finland. It's good that it's working. I mean, you can also do this with your mobile phone, obviously, to scan the QR code. So we have Hungary, Italy, Ireland, Sweden, France, and Finland. Belgium, France, getting a bit bigger. So nine people have, 10 have already voted. Italy. Wow, Latvia, Denmark, Germany, UK, 15 people. It's also a check on how many people are in the seminar.
I think we can move to the
Okay.
next, please. Yeah.
And a quick check on which professional profile do you have, like which of our groups do you belong to that we like to address and talk to? Okay, law enforcement, architect, representative researcher, other. Okay, I was just wondering if we have any no faith institution managers with us, but it's good. Okay. Also, we are well balanced, it looks like. Okay. Thank you. And so I will stop sharing now. Okay, that worked as well. And I will hand over to Shaukat Warraich from the Enhancing Faith Institutions, who is the project coordinator of the SOAR project and who will give us an overview of what happened in the last year so far and what are the plans for the next year. Shaukat, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Veronika and Gloria and the ACE team and the SOAR team in general. Great to be with everybody. As mentioned, my name is Shaukat Warraich. I'm the Director of EFI, Enhancing Faith Institutions, who's the coordinator for the SOAR project. I know time is very tight, and I'm going to kind of rush through the points that Veronika mentioned about how the project has developed over the past year. We're just coming to the end of the first year, and it's been a very, very interesting and exciting first year. We're working in 7 countries. The project is working in Denmark, Hungary, Germany, France, Netherlands, Austria.
Alors là-dedans, il n'y a en fait que François Ducot-Projet.
Thank you. So the project has been initiated in 7 EU countries. We'd like to just to mention that this is an EU-funded project, and we're delighted to be working with the EU, and we're delighted for the support that they have provided. There are 3 consortium members, Enhancing Faith Institutions, Finchurch Aid, and the Architects Council of Europe. And we have an external advisory board that is chaired by the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. The project is fundamentally looking at providing advice, training, and support to places of worship, focusing on vulnerable institutions, vulnerable places of worship. And there is a process where we are doing risk assessments to 50 locations around the 7 countries. We're providing training programs online as well as offline, and we are developing training materials as well as other advice to support faith communities in the European region, and providing all this material on the web platform, and the URL will be provided later. How are we working on the ground? We are working with all faiths. This is an interfaith, multi-faith initiative. Every institution, every faith, that has an institution is welcome to engage with this project. Even if you haven't got even if you don't own an institution, but you worship in a building that you may hire, rent, you're more than welcome to participate. And we have community development officers, CDOs, working in these 7 countries, engaging people on the ground to basically talk about and engage and listen to about the challenges faith leaders are experiencing when it comes to particularly hate crime and violence and matters relating to affecting their places of worship. Those places of worship do not need to be just mega iconic, institution like huge cathedrals or huge mosques or temples. They can be right down to the micro level, small rented accommodation with 1 or 2 rooms. If you have a physical hardware facility and you worship within there and you feel that you need a level of security or you want to understand security, this project is for you. And we are starting to engage hundreds of people, if not thousands so far, in this project. My colleague later on will talk about the data. Why is this important? And has there been an increase or decrease, or what's the level of attacks on places of worship? And unfortunately, the data is indicating that there are, unfortunately, attacks are on the rise. Incidents against places of worship are on the rise, and attacks on people displaying their faith is being attacked is on the rise as well, unfortunately. And hence the timeliness of this project is is very important. And I think the EU made a very, very important strategic decision here to support this initiative. And we obviously are delighted to be involved in delivering this program. Just to put a little bit of context, just in the past 3 months, these are attacks that have happened around the world. In Pakistan last month, 80 people were killed in a bomb attack and over 200 injured. A Jewish synagogue was attacked. A person held people hostage in a synagogue, and he was later killed by law enforcement agencies. Again, in Halle, Germany, another attack on a place of worship. A few years ago, there was an attack on a synagogue, and just in February, there was an attack on a mosque there. And this is a building in your bottom right-hand corner in Detroit, where a person attacked a mosque, and particularly the women's entrance of that facility. So unfortunately, places of worship are have been targets for extremists and terrorists, and unfortunately, those institutions and those leaders running those institutions are beginning to realize that there needs to be some action taking place. So the focus of this particular initiative is around about risk assessments, providing training to places of worship, and also looking at what tactical and strategic advice can be given on security by design, what architectural features can be provided and offered and advised upon when people are looking at implementing security, and also engaging with policymakers on what should be the future direction of this very important initiative. This initiative, obviously, as I've mentioned, has started last April, and we have now engaged practically on the ground in those 7 countries that I mentioned earlier. And we have started to deliver training in 5 of the 7 countries. The 2 countries where we haven't delivered training yet is in Hungary and in Austria, but we have people on the ground that are engaging with faith leadership as we speak, and we are planning to deliver in those countries pretty shortly, probably after April. These are just some images of the training programs that we have, and we've been actually quite pleasantly surprised at the level of take-up from the community. Many of the events have been very well attended, and in some cases oversubscribed. We had an event in Lille. We had a capacity of 50 people. We had over 70 people, and another 30 people on the waiting list, and we're planning to do another event there as we speak. Security by design, which is what we're talking about today, is a very important strategic component of this particular program, and we've started to introduce this idea to the faith leaders, and there's been very, very positive take-up about this idea, and a very keen interest about what can be achieved. And these are some of the comments that people, sorry, I've just gone ahead. These are some of the comments that people are basically asking very much about: how do you harden these infrastructures? What are the measures that need to be taken by faith leaders and community activists on basically stopping criminal damage, and what to do in an extreme physical attack? So these are questions that religious leaders are beginning to ask. They want independent external advisors to come in and assess their places of worship. So our risk assessment currently, we have a target for 50 institutions, but at the moment already we're probably going to exceed the request for advice. So there's clearly an appetite from faith leaders and people managing these facilities to basically get an independent view on what their risk is and how to mitigate against that risk. And then the third element that they're asking about is what practical measures can be taken if they can't afford some of the measures, the hardware measures. What can be given to faith leaders and communities to basically protect the faith institutions? Because some of these architectural changes and hardware implementations are not cheap. So they're looking for practical examples that can be affordable, sustainable, and actually have an impact as well. So there's a great appetite about what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. We are starting to show practical examples, and here are just some images. And these are very capturing the imagination of a lot of places of worship. And the question always that we're getting at the moment is, where do we get these facilities from? And do they actually meet the European standards? And this is what this program is about. I know those European standards are being designed, they are being documented, and our project is hopefully going to contribute in some way to helping deliver those standards and those concepts to the community at large. So the materials that are being developed at the moment, and we're very much looking forward to the toolkit, the Security by Design toolkit that the EU is putting together, but we're already disseminating the EU quick guide and also supplementing the EU quick guide with materials that we've already developed. So this is a very important initiative. It's an initiative that we feel that is making a big impact on the ground. It's a concept that people have never heard, especially faith leaders have never heard from before or heard about, and they are very keen to hear about this. And your input as architects and faith leaders in this program is hopefully going to shape the direction of how the EU wishes to talk about it, what the standards will be, and how we wish to disseminate those ideas moving forward. So I'm delighted that this program is taking place today, and really looking forward to the feedback that you all provide. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing people's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaukat. Okay, so I can now hand over the floor to Nicoleta Mirza, who also works for Enhancing Faith Institution, and she has done some research on the current situation in Europe, and we're really happy that she's going to share her results with us today. Are you able to share your screen, Nicoleta?
Yes, I believe so. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicoleta Mirza. I'm a policy researcher for EFI, and today I'll be talking about the current situation in the EU and security challenges faced by at-risk religious communities. So, as you already know, we are working in 7 countries: France, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Austria. And today I'll be talking about each of them. So let's start with France. So on the screen, you're seeing the data from the National Advisory Commission on Human Rights. So as you can see, since 2018 to 2019, there has been a spike of anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic hate crime, also racism, hate crime. For instance, in 2019, there were 154 hate crimes against the Muslim community and 687 crimes against, or anti-Semitic crimes or crimes against the Jewish community. Here is the data of religious hate crime recorded by the police. So if we look at 2019-2020, we can see a somewhat of a decrease in religious hate crimes. However, I would like to point out that in 2019, there were over 1,500 incidents, and in 2020, there were again over 1,000 religious hate crimes in France. According to our research, which was obtained from open sources and media results, we were able to identify 516 incidents against places of worship in France. I would like to point out that in 2020, the data only represents the first couple of months, not the entire year. So from our research, we were able to identify incidents against the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim communities. So as we can see, in our case, most incidents in France are taking place against the Christian community. And here are the incidents on the map. The red pointers point to the Christian community. The green ones point to the Muslim community, and the blue one point to the Jewish community. In the case of Belgium, UNIA, which is the Interfederal Center for Equal Opportunities, an independent public institution, is recording anti-religious hate crimes. So as we can see, in 2020, there were 376 anti-religious incidents in Belgium, and we are not observing a significant decrease in anti-religious incidents in Belgium. Here is the data represented by community. So most incidents in Belgium are taking place against the Muslim community, with 290 incidents in 2019 and 230 in 2020. The second highest numbers of anti-religious hate crimes are taking place against the Jewish community, with 90 incidents in 2019 and 126 in 2020. Here is the incidents that we were able to identify, and there were a total of 169 hate crimes incidents and attacks against religious sites. And again, the three most affected communities in this case are the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communities, with over 35 incidents or anti-Muslim incidents in 2016 alone. And here are the incidents on a map. Again, green is the Muslim community, purple Christian, and blue the Jewish community. In the case of Germany, here's data recorded, hate crime data recorded by the police. So we can see an increase of hate crimes in Germany from over 3,000 incidents in 2015 to over 10,000 incidents in 2020, which points us to an obvious problem. Here, again, the data collected by the police by community. So we can see an increase of hate crimes both for the Jewish and Muslim communities, with over 2,300 incidents against the Jewish community in 2020, which is quite alarming considering that the Jewish population in Germany represents only 0.1 of the total population, followed by over, again, 1,000 incidents against the Muslim community, which only represent 3.5% of the total Jewish population. According to our research, we were able to identify 1,162 incidents against places of worship in Germany. So as we can see on the graph itself, we can see a spike in incidents against places of worship, with over 250 incidents recorded only in 2020. And again, the data for 2021 only represents the first couple of months. And here are the number of attacks against places of worship in Germany. Purple is the Christian community, blue the Jewish, and green the Muslim communities. And as we can see, most attacks are happening in West Germany due to a higher concentration of places of worship in that area. In the case of Netherlands, here is the hate crime recorded by the police. We can see a decrease in hate crimes in Germany, but I would like to point out that in the Netherlands, I would like to point out that in the Netherlands, the police have been changing their method of reporting hate crime, which might point to why there is a decrease in hate crimes. For instance, we can see that if we look by community, again, the data is not really uniform. In 2018, for instance, the police stopped recording bias against Muslims or crimes against Muslims as a separate hate crime. According to, so the graph that we're seeing on the screen is from the Israel Information and Documentation Center. So in 2020, they registered 135 anti-Semitic incidents. But I would like to point our attention to 2019, which recorded 182 incidents. This is the highest number ever recorded by this organization. According to European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, 30% of Muslims in the Netherlands have been discriminated based on religion or religion beliefs in the last 5 years. 42 are discriminated based on ethnic origin or immigrant background, which again, the first is the first highest number out of 16 countries that participated in the survey, and the second is the second highest number out of 16 participating in the survey, and 9% of Muslims in the Netherlands are discriminated based on their skin color. 35% of the Jewish respondents experienced anti-Semitic harassment in the last 12 months. 47 experienced anti-Semitic harassment in the last 5 months. 26 state that they experienced threatening and offensive comments in person. 17 experienced offensive gestures or inappropriate staring. 15 experienced offensive comments on the internet. And 25 reported the most serious incidents, which again is the second highest reporting number according to the survey. We were able to identify 104 incidents against places of worship in the Netherlands, mostly happening against Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and we also found a number of incidents against the Hindu community in the Netherlands. And here are the incidents on a map. In the case of Austria, here are the religious hate crimes recorded by the police. The police recorded over 30 incidents in 2019 and over 50 incidents in 2020. However, I would like to point our attention to the data gathered by non-state actors, which compared to the police registered in 2019 over 200 incidents. The same goes for 2020, again, over 200 incidents against the religious communities. According to the data from the Documentation and Advice Center for People Who Experienced Islamophobia and Anti-Muslim Crime, there were over 1,400 anti-Muslim hate crimes in Austria, and we can see, as shown in the graph, an increase of anti-Muslim hate crimes. Here is the data from the Jewish community of Vienna, again, shows an increase of hate crimes with 585 incidents in 2020, and in the first 6 months of 2021, there were already 562 anti-Semitic hate crimes in Austria. According to our research, we were able to identify 77 incidents against places of worship, mostly targeting the Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim communities. And here are the incidents on the map, and the yellow pointers point to the Buddhist community, again, purple Christian, green Muslim, and a blue Jewish community. In the case of Denmark, the police are showing an increase of, again, religious hate crimes with in 2019 and 2020 with over 150 incidents per year. Here is the data from the Jewish community in Denmark, registering in 2017, 2018, and 2019 over 30 incidents per year. We were able to identify 25 incidents against places of worship in Denmark between 2015 and 2021. Again, the data for 2021 is not complete. Mostly the most affected communities being Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. And here are the incidents placed on a map. And now our last country, which is Hungary. Here's the data from hate crime data recorded by police. Unfortunately, the data is missing for 2015, and the numbers are not really uniform. The Action Protection League in Hungary are recording anti-Semitic incidents in the country, and they registered again from 2014 to 2020 over 30 incidents per year. Fortunately, they're also looking at the type of incidents which are occurring against the Jewish community, which is vandalism, assault, hate speech, discrimination, damage to property, and threats. We were able to identify 48 incidents against places of worship in Hungary between 2010 and 2021. Again, the data is taken from media sources. There are probably a lot more incidents happening against places of worship. Most incidents in this place that we're able to identify are taking place against the Jewish, Christian, Muslim communities. Again, data for 2021 is not yet complete. Here are the incidents on a map. Blue, again, Jewish, green, Muslim, red, Christian, and yellow one point to unknown communities. I would also try to talk very briefly about the types of attacks that we encounter, which are thefts, offensive actions, graffiti, arson, animal parts placed in or around places of worship. And unfortunately, this is especially the case for the Muslim community. Projection of places of worship, again, mostly Jewish and Muslim communities, color attacks. And when we talk about attacks, we're discussing attacks with knives, guns, Molotov cocktails, and so on. Brick doors, literally doors being bricked at the entrance of the place of worship. Protests, again, mostly Jewish and Muslim communities. Damage, break-ins, hate messages, terrorist attacks, offensive actions, harassments, disturbance of of service and unfortunately attacks resulting in death. That would be all, and I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicoleta. This was a lot of numbers and a lot of graphs, and during the presentation the question came whether the slides will be available afterwards, and I said we will ask all presenters if they are willing to share their slides, and if yes, then we can of course send it to the attendees. Okay, so I will hand over the floor now to Mr. Schumacher and Mr. Karlos from the European Commission Joint Research Center. Thank you very much for joining us. It's always good to have the European Commission at such events. And you're going to talk to us about the Security by Design toolkit and more, I think. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can see my presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vasileios Karlos, and I am working for the European Commission since 2013. And today I will present to you a couple of things that are derived from a Security by Design book that is underway. A couple of things for those of you who are not familiar with the JRC. So the acronym stands for Joint Research Center. It's one of the Directorate Generals of the Commission, so more or less something like a ministry in member states. And it acts as the science and knowledge service of the Commission. So we have a very big field, almost 3,000 people work at the JRC. And they are experts in fields like environment, food, nuclear, so many different fields. And the idea of the JRC, so the mission is to support the policy of the Commission. There are 6 sites of the JRC. So the headquarters, let's say headquarters, because that's where the Director General is in Brussels, of course. But the biggest site, that's also where I am located, is in Ispra, in Italy, close to Lago Maggiore, next to Milan. And of course, this is the biggest one, but there are also other smaller ones, another one in Belgium, in Hel, in Germany, Karlsruhe, and the Netherlands in Sevilla, in Spain. So, what I'm going to talk to you about today, I hope it's not a very technical presentation, but it's information derived from this publication that we're going to have in some months. So what are the protection needs, especially for places of worship? Of course, we already know that 100% protection is not feasible, not only in technical terms, but also in economical terms, of course. So the focus is usually on the risk mitigation. And we know that usually places of worship pose an easy target because they are generally of open nature. And since they attract a big number of people, an attack could potentially have very high consequences, depending, of course, on the attack type. So the idea here is to find an efficient balance between the efficient protection, both in economic terms and in protection terms, and also the people that you want to protect, while we maintain the attractiveness and the openness of those places of worship. Just to be on the same page, I'm quite certain that you already familiar more or less with that. So security by design derives from the information and communication technologies, from the ICT. And the term usually is like to make systems as free of vulnerabilities to attack as possible via continuous testing, authentication, safeguards, and adherence to best programming practices. And more or less, this is the same approach that we can have for physical security. So what is security by design? It's more or less includes security and protection aspects from the beginning of the planning and design process, or even the redesign of a place. Okay, so to take it into account immediately. So this publication that I was talking about, it mainly focuses on public spaces, open public spaces, so mainly public spaces that are not in buildings, but of course it also applies to places of worship. And it deals with issues like we have chapters that are dedicated to differences between the European Union and the rest of the world. So what are the differences of public spaces between those two? There is a chapter dedicated on the risk assessment, technical aspects that I'm going to go into a little bit detail later. There is a chapter on project management and how to deal with such a project. And an important one is the cost-benefit analysis, because this can help you. This can help a stakeholder to decide which measures are more appropriate for its asset. There is another one dedicated on sociological aspects, so how these measures affect the psychology of people, and also legal aspects, which is important also for camera, CCTV, all the electronic systems that one can adopt in order to enhance its security. So all these different, each chapter of those is handled by a different expert. Most of them are outside of the European Commission. And yeah, today I'm going to guide you through a little bit of an overview of this publication. So obviously, the advantages, the security by design has some certain advantages if we compare it, especially with ad hoc solutions. One of the most important is that it's much less likely to have conflict with existing services and utilities. Especially if we are talking in an urban environment, it's almost certain that we will find some kind of utilities if we want to install some kind of barriers or other type of measures in order to protect our space. Another obvious advantage is that they can be better integrated with the surroundings. So in terms of aesthetics, so we can have improved aesthetics, we can have a better enhanced livability, a better use, and enhanced safety. And we're going to go through them in detail a little bit later. Usually, in most cases, we are talking about more efficient measures. And not only that, but in the long term, the costs are substantially lower. Costs for operational costs, costs regarding maintenance, all these things, especially if we follow this the security by design concept, we can have much lower costs in the long term. And not only that, but we can have much less time that is consumed during the diversion. So when we are installing a measure, if we take it into account from the beginning of a project, then we obviously need less time, and we don't have to invest a lot of money in order to diverse all the existing infrastructures. And this is important, the next point, that taking into account security measures from the beginning, we can have what is called multifunctionality. So we can design something which is not only designed for one single threat, but is designed for multiple threats, or that it can be used for multiple things, not only for security, but also for aesthetics, for instance, or for safety issues. And the last one is, we have already talked about it, it's that it can be easily integrated into an overall protective design. So these are the key principles of security by design, and I'm going to probably repeat them during the presentation. First of all is multifunctionality. I've already mentioned that, it's the fact that we can have a solution that not only works for one threat, but for different threats. Or that we can use it also for different uses. Proportionality. When we design something, to design it for the threat that we have analyzed. We don't need to put something which is bigger or more costly than what is needed. So it has to be proportional to the threat. Then we have the design and the aesthetics of the measure, of the solution. So it has to be very well integrated into the environment. And then cooperation of stakeholders. So stakeholders has to be able to cooperate in order to produce a solution that will be both aesthetically pleasing and also functional. Let me start from what you mentioned also during the previous presentation a bit, the risk assessment. So we have a dedicated chapter there. I will mention only a couple of things. If you want later, we can go a little bit more into detail. Because what are the expectations of the risk assessment process? First of all, is to make it easier for whoever is taking the decision to take a decision, to select a kind of measure. Then is to identify which assets, so which places of worship in this case, pose the highest risk for each threat. And not only that, but also to prioritize which assets pose the higher risk. And the last point is quite important, is to increase the objectivity of this risk assessment approach. The risk assessment, due to its nature, it has a very big degree of subjectivity, which depends on the assessor. So with what we are proposing here, we are trying to introduce a more quantitative, I would say, approach, so as to decrease these biased results at the end. So the idea is to have a more quantitative, or let's say semi-quantitative approach in this risk assessment. And that's more or less the process. This follows the ISO standard. During the first stage of the risk assessment, we identify the threats. So we identify which threats are relevant for our asset. And what is important is to identify the vulnerabilities of our places of worship, so as to build potential attack scenarios. So we are taking into account the current measures that we have, and we are building different attack scenarios. And at the second stage, here comes the risk analysis. So from the scenarios that we have already built, we go into assessing the likelihood of each scenario. This is a very difficult task, obviously, especially if we're talking about hate crimes, about terrorism attacks, because we have not a lot of data. So it's a tricky one. And then to assess what would be the potential consequences. And by combining these two things, so the likelihood and the consequences, we can then have a risk level for each place of worship and decide eventually if this risk that we have calculated needs to be reduced. So in this case, someone has to bite the bullet and say, okay, I accept this kind of risk, or I don't accept this kind of risk. And then at the last stage comes the risk treatment. So we are describing the potential mitigation solutions, measures, and of course, someone has to accept the residual risk, because there's already a kind of residual risk. Just a couple of things about the vulnerability assessment, and that's the only thing I'm going to talk about here, because it's a really crucial part in the risk assessment process. because from that we derive potential scenarios. So we should take into account things like, for instance, what are the entry and the exit points, what's the crowd density, what's the crowd flow, if there is any measures already at the perimeter security, if there is a kind of access control, etc. If we have any random checks, internal controls, etc. So one has to go through those things one by one to understand what kind of vulnerabilities the asset has and derive potential scenarios. Because also we don't want to we want to prevent any additional vulnerabilities. We don't want, for instance, to create long queues of people outside the place of worship, because that's like creating additional vulnerabilities to our place of worship. And that's where we get at the end. So the idea of the risk assessment is to make an analysis and derive where our place of worship lies in this matrix. And according to the risk level that we have calculated, decide if this risk level is acceptable or if it needs to be reduced. Okay, and then bear into mind that this process can be repeated so as to see what's the residual risk. So if we manage to reduce the risk level, which is the case, I guess, but even if we manage to reduce it, what's the new risk level? So let's go a little bit through the technical aspects that are included into the security by design. Because we say, okay, introducing measures that are nice, that are aesthetically pleasing, that are integrated into the environment, but these measures have to follow certain principles, certain design principles. So let's talk first about the perimeter of a place of worship. And this is crucial because it's quite often that we have people presence around. And during events, it can be, the crowd can be quite big. And commonly, we don't have any measures around. So what is the solution? The solution is obviously that you can enhance your perimeter security, either by introducing fences or barriers or planters, or even trimming bushes and trees, trying to limit unexposed areas, so dark areas, areas that you cannot see, that someone can hide into. And then it's the usual case that many people adopt temporary measures in case of events. But even those, we need to have some thought before we decide what kind of measures we're going to insert. Okay. This is obviously the best case scenario. Okay, being able to design these things. So as I told you before, multifunctional solutions. So double duty or triple duty structures that do not offer only protection, but they offer also improved, enhanced aesthetics. And they also blend into the urban design. So we can play there. For the perimeter, we can have a mix of pollards, planters, vegetation, street furniture. These are very nice solutions. Though, even if you decide to do something like that, you have to follow certain principles. For instance, here, okay, we decide that, let's say that we might have the threat of a vehicle accelerating and ramming into the crowd. And someone can decide that, okay, we will insert traffic calming solutions, chicanes that are nice. They have, they're not intrusive. They have a very calming effect. They have certain disadvantages, of course, as you can see. They're costly. They can cause accidents. And they, of course, need a lot of space. But even for such a solution, one has to bear in mind that it's not only something that you put and you decide to insert it. You have to follow certain rules. You have to follow certain rules depending on the on certain parameters that you can see here. What kind of barriers you will put along the curbs, along the sidewalks, and especially what kind of solution. So do you need a single chicane? Do you need a double chicane? Things like that. And since I'm talking about cars here, so what do we need when what's the threat? And how to design for such a threat for a crowd that lies outside the place of worship. So what we need in order to design a kind of measure here, we need the vehicle type and its velocity at the point of interest. And here I inserted this slide just to tell you that we have created this kind of tool. Just to say that we're talking about reliability here, okay? We have created this kind of tool that allows you to calculate the speed or the maximum speed of incoming vehicles. And it's a quite straightforward tool. It's quite easy to use because the user, the only thing that has to do is to select its area. So let's say this is the square in front of your place of worship. So you just say that, okay, I want to protect this one. And then the user selects a big area, so the area where a vehicle might drive in order to enter the area. And then this is all based on OpenStreetMaps. It's a kind of Google Map application that it's free to use. And then what the software does is that it starts calculating the speed of the vehicle from the starting point up to the entry point to your area, taking into account the geometry of the streets, the curvature, the slopes, etc. So it's quite nice because you can actually have the maximum speed of the vehicle at the point of entry, so you can decide what kind of measure you need. We are talking about security by design and how to change the whole area, design it in a very nice aesthetic kind of way. Yet again, here, for instance, let's say that someone wants to, it has enough space and he wants to design some ditches which have been used since ancient times to protect castles, for instance, like here. Yet again, you have to respect certain characteristics, like here. So it's not only designing something beautiful, but also respecting the technical aspects. If you don't respect these characteristics, a vehicle might just fly over with a certain type of speed. It can really fly over the suspensions, can recuperate the lack of soil here, and it can just jump over. Or that's the other way around. If you want to make a berm, again, you need to respect certain characteristics to avoid this thing happening, so to avoid the vehicle going over. Not only that, but also taking into account the stability, erosion of what you are creating. Of course, you always have the option of planting trees on top, or here you have a line of kind of bollards or concrete barriers. Of course, if you plant trees, it changes the characteristics. But yet again, these are things that you have to take in mind. Or this, and this doesn't only stand, this minimum distance doesn't only stand for bollards. This is the maximum distance that should be respected for whatever solution you are designing. Imagine benches, imagine planters, imagine multifunctional elements. They should respect some certain characteristics, otherwise someone can drive through them. Okay. And these are nice solutions. Of course, these are beautiful solutions. These are not usual planters. By the way, these hide inside bollards, so these are for heightened security places. But yes, of course, you always have to bear in mind that if you just put a planter and you just place it on the street, you rely only on the friction between the planter and the street. That's what will absorb the energy of an incoming vehicle. And yes, security by design, aesthetic solutions. These are not aesthetic solutions, obviously. These only serve as temporary measures. So you might make them a little bit better, like this one in Milan, but yet again, they don't blend in very nicely with the surrounding environment. Okay, and also they don't offer much protection. These look more beautiful. Okay, the protection level is very low for these ones, but at least aesthetically, they blend in nicely with the environment. Okay, Christmas time, they don't look that bad. You could even say that they are more harmonically integrated into the environment, especially more than those kinds of concrete blocks. Or these ones. This is in Stockholm. And you can see that when you are starting to think about placing these kinds of solutions, take into account not only, of course, how they look. So here they chose the lions because there is a history of the city about that. Okay, that also applies to places of worship. You can choose whatever you want that is more or less related to your place of worship. But when you are selecting a solution, try to design it according to your threat. So this is the original one. So you can see that it was, this is after the attack that happened in Stockholm. It was pushed aside by the truck that entered the pedestrian zone. Okay, so try to design something. So these are the old ones, these are the new ones. You can see the difference in size. So as to be able to stop a bigger vehicle. And also, these are not only placed on the ground, because as I told you before, you are only relying on the friction. These are actually buttons, so they are connected also to the ground. Like here, but obviously this was not efficient at all. And let's pass a little bit to the building protection and what are the aspects that we need to take into account when designing these kinds of solutions. Obviously, progressive collapse is not usually the case for places of worship. There's a very, very low probability for that. But facades, yes, we know that glazing is very fragile, and we have solutions there that someone has to take into account before deciding. And I will go into detail. And of course, what kind of access control measures we can insert in order to minimize the risk. So let's go to access control. Obviously, controlling and limited access is a very nice thing for limiting the risk. It's not always a possibility, I know, but there are also other solutions that you can take directly into account, like for instance, securing doors or windows where the building is vacant, and also limiting the point of access. You don't need many points of access. You can limit them so as to also monitor them easier. Or maybe also if it's a closed event, if it's attended by a limited number of people, maybe also locking the doors is a possibility. And also visual deterrence. Someone can put like signs, alarms, cameras, even cameras that don't work. Usually the best mitigation measure is the one that mitigates an attack without knowing that it mitigated the attack. As it deterred, sorry, an attack. Usually attacks, they don't take place because a potential aggressor sees that it's a site where there are security measures and it just decides to go to another one. And another very important aspect is the awareness and the preparedness of the personnel there. Designing an awareness campaign is very crucial in this in a security by design concept. I mentioned glazing before, we know that it's a very fragile, as I told you before. You can also have splinters, someone can enter. So the idea here is when you're designing your asset, to take into account what kind of threat you're facing. Is an anti-shatter film a solution that would be ideal for you? Depending on the risk assessment and the cost-benefit analysis that I'm going to talk a little bit later, you can decide, you can facilitate the decision if it's the solution for you. For instance, an anti-shatter film, it's easy to adapt. You can see it here. It's very easy to adapt, even to existing buildings. Of course, there are big questions concerning how this will be connected to the frame, or what's the life cycle, how it reacts with the environmental conditions. But you can, of course, have even solutions that offer more protection, but are also most costly. We have also the option of laminated glasses, like the ones you see here, which are like two glass panes, and in the middle they have some kind of silicone layer that holds glasses together in case they break. And then doors. When you are designing doors, for instance, you should take into account your threat. So do you need a solid frame? Probably. Do you need to have pins at the interior so that it's harder for an intruder to break into? Probably. So start thinking about those things from the initial design stages. And then this is the last stage, that's the risk management stage. So as I told you before, we have actually two options here. The one is that the risk is deemed as acceptable. And it means that, okay, we leave it as it is, we are accepting the risk. And the other option is that to say, okay, the risk is quite high, so we are going to mitigate it, we are going to decrease it. And cost benefit. So the idea here is to balance the benefits against costs, effort or disadvantages of implementation. So we're taking all into account. So the idea is that the cost-effective measures outweighs the cost of providing the measure. So if you see at this diagram here, we have a security measure, and if we adopt it, we can have a reduced threat, a reduced vulnerability, an enhanced resilience, or a reduced exposure. And this is more or less the benefit. We reduce the risk, but of course this has a certain cost. So putting that into a scale, you can understand if it's a solution that worth the effort or not. So more or less where we are in this triangle here. So if the risk is tolerable, or if the cost is grossly disproportionate to the improvement which is gained, if the risk is negligible or not. So this cost-benefit analysis is, okay, it's not a decision-making tool, but it really helps you taking a decision. It's a risk-informed tool. So it helps you to take informed decisions. So these are the guides that, this is my last slides. These are the guides that are already available. from the Commission. You can find it more or less here in this Science Hub. So what I showed you today is there in the book that is coming out. In the next few months, those of you who haven't subscribed to this newsletter for the protection of public spaces, you can do it. You can just go to this link and subscribe. It comes out every 3-4 months, and it includes things like funding opportunities and also articles regarding the protection, new publications, etc. Not only from us, but also from all the community. And that's all. Thank you. That's all. I hope I was not too long.
Well, 10 minutes too long.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's okay. It was interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. Mr. Schumacher, are you also sharing slides?
No, I'm not sharing slides.
Or is there anything you like?
All from us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what I want to add is that I think when you look on the website and maybe subscribe to our newsletter, you will discover a number of tools. So Vasilis already mentioned our vehicle ramming tools. There are a lot of other tools that we are developing that we couldn't present here. And so there's a lot of guidance. Well, obviously, this is geared to protection of public spaces, and places of worship are a very specific case. But let's say a lot of the general concepts nevertheless apply also to places of worship. And especially, I think we were talking about the part which is related to cost-benefit analysis, project management, also maybe working with public authorities. So I think there's going to be quite a lot of that in the book that we were talking about. And I think for, let's say, places of worship, that can be important because I think you have a lot of stakeholders which are public authorities, and the way to work together is, I think, an important part. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both of you. And I saw that my colleague Gloria also posted the link in the chat to subscribe to the newsletter you mentioned.
I will also forward you the presentation so you can share it with the members so they can find also the information in the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So just a note to everyone who was not here at 10 o'clock. I already said at the beginning that we might finish by 12:30. So I hope we can sort of catch up, and we hope you all stay until the end because we have an interactive part at the end. So then I will hand over the floor to Dr. Csaba Szabo from the Hungarian Ministry of the Interior. He's a police lieutenant colonel and has done his PhD research on security of Christian sites in Hungary. So what we will do now is, because he prefers to present his slides in Hungarian, he has brought with him Mrs. Anita Varga, who is the foreign language coordinator of the scientific journal Plügyicenk. I hope I pronounced this correct. So Dr. Szabo will present in Hungarian, and then Miss Varga will give us the English translation of the slides. So the floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Hello, everyone. Actually, we don't have a PPT, sorry about that, but my colleague Csaba, he will start to talk about his project, and I will translate it, and we try to be as fast as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Üdvözlünk mindenkit Budapestről.
Hello, everyone from Budapest.
Ebben a rövid előadásban szeretnék egy olyan koncepciót felvázolni, ami már 2016-tól működő projekt.
So in this presentation, I will introduce a project that is on and a research that is on since 2016.
A Nemzeti Közszolgálati Egyetem kutatásai keretében zajlottak ezek a kutatások, és hát a mai napig folytatjuk ezeket a kutatásokat, és hát több olyan tudományos és szakmai eredményt tudtunk felvonultatni, amiket most szeretnék itt a résztvevők számára bemutatni.
So these are ongoing projects with a partnership of the Hungarian University of Public Service, and the aim of this presentation is to present some of the results that they gained so far.
Szeretném kihangsúlyozni, hogy elsősorban itt a biztonsági kérdéseket vizsgáltuk, hiszen rendőrként ezeket tartjuk a legfontosabbnak, és hát ezek a biztonsági javaslatok a keresztény szent helyek védelmére vonatkozik elsősorban.
So actually this is more about from a security perspective, as my colleague is also has worked as a police officer. So it's more the law enforcement side that we would like to highlight and to give some recommendation.
Első körben a létfontosságú infrastruktúráknak a fogalomkörét vizsgáltuk meg. A fő koncepciónk az volt, hogy hogyan lehetne ezt a jogi fogalmat úgy kibővíteni, hogy a keresztény szenthelyeknek a biztonsági helyzetét ezáltal lehet valamilyen formában stabilizálni vagy erősíteni.
So the main question was whether the concept of critical infrastructure could be extended to provide a legal basis for the protection of these Christian holy places and the strengthening of the security of also the Christian communities.
A következő lépésként megvizsgáltuk a létfontosságú infrastruktúráknak a fogalomkörét, és itt olyan eredményeket kaptunk, amivel tudtuk azt bizonyítani, hogy valójában ezt a fogalomkörnek, vagy ennek a fogalomkörnek a kibővítésével lehet valamilyen formában a keresztény szent helyeknek a védelmét erősíteni.
So we have examined the concept of critical infrastructure and all of its elements with a view to the possibility of reorganizing the commonly used conceptual framework in order to protect these Christian holy places.
Három fontos tényezőt vizsgáltunk.
We were examining three main parts of it.
Az első volt a lakossággal összefüggő hatások.
So the first impact, that we were examining was the population-related impacts.
Itt elsősorban azt vizsgáltuk, hogy magára a lakosságra milyen hatást gyakorol, hogyha keresztény szent helyek ellen történnek támadások.
So here, as a result of the growing social demand for holy places and religious experiences, individual or group participation in related events is becoming more widespread and stronger. So we were also aiming to examine the impact on that.
Egyúttal vizsgáltuk a kutatás során a szent helyeknek a kulturális, történeti és építészeti jelentőségét is.
But all these religious sites are not only about the religion, or it's not only a place of worship, but also it can be examined in a perspective of, or like a cultural perspective, historical, and of course architectural as well.
A következtetések ilyen szempontból egyértelműen voltak, hiszen azt maga az eredmények is azt bizonyították, hogyha egy keresztény szent helyen történik támadás, akkor az akár az egyén és a társadalom számára is ugye jelentős negatív.
So actually, what we can say is that when it comes to either individual or a group attack on a Christian holy place, that attack has also an effect on the society as a whole in terms of the number of potential victims and of course regarding the destruction of the religious place.
Röviden vizsgáltuk a politikai és a kormányzati hatásokat. Itt tényleg csak egy mondatot szeretnék kihangsúlyozni, hiszen hogyha a keresztény szent helyek ellen történik támadás, akkor ebben az esetben, hogy az állam működésére is jelentős hatást gyakorol, és itt a instabil kormányzás léphet fel. Ezt az oldalát vizsgáltuk második.
So next to the population-related impact, the political and governmental impact was also taken into account. And what we can say here is that that all these attacks, of course, have like a direct impact on the political side or political parties, and of course on the state leadership as well. And in extreme cases, it can lead to like an unstable governments as well.
Harmadik körben vizsgáltuk a pszichológiai hatást. Ugye itt azt a részt vizsgáltuk, hogy az egyénre, a társadalomra és a közösségekre milyen hatást gyakorolnak pszichológiai szempontból a keresztény szent helyekre elkövetett támadások.
And regarding the third part that we were examining was the psychological effect of these attacks. And so, of course, these attacks can cause like a psychological effect as well, regarding or changes regarding the society, the communities, and even, of course, on an individual level.
A kutatást 2019-ben folytattuk, és legfőképpen a rendészeti sajátosságokat vizsgáltuk.
In 2019, this whole research was ongoing more like from a law enforcement perspective.
Igen, és első lépésként kockázatkezelési technikákat elemeztünk, és egy olyan működőképes sorrendet állítottunk fel annak érdekében, hogy megvizsgáljuk, melyek azok a keresztény szent helyek, amelyek a legnagyobb veszélyben vannak kitéve, ugye Magyarországon belül.
So for that, first we analyzed this whole situation using risk management techniques, and we also established like a hierarchy in order to examine which Christian holy sites are the most at risk within a given country.
A kutatásba elemzőket is bevontunk, mivel a kutatást kiegészítettük egy matematikai elemzőmodellnek az alkalmazásával is.
The study was also, all this whole research was also complemented by the application of a mathematical analytical model.
Magyar nyelven ebből tanulmány is készült, ennek a címe az Európai Keresztény Szent Helyek védelmének és fenyegetettségének a rendészeti szempontból történő elemzése.
So we also prepared a study out of it entitled Law Enforcement Analysis of the Protection and Threat to Christian Holy Sites in Europe.
Igen, itt a kutatásban még olyanokat vizsgáltunk, hogy a keresztény szent helyeknek az elhelyezkedése, megközelíthetősége, hogyan lehet ezeket a leggyorsabban és legdemokratikusabban kiüríteni, de elsősorban szeretném arra felhívni a figyelmet, hogy ezt mind rendészeti oldalról vizsgáltuk ezeket a kérdéseket.
So we also examined the security options for the location, the accessibility, and also the evacuation strategies of these holy places, but these were mainly based or were examined from like a law enforcement perspective.
Igen, és a kapott adatok birtokában megállapítottuk a lehetséges biztonsági kockázatoknak a mértékét. Ugye ezeknek a segítségével ki lehet jelölni azokat a rendészeti, magánbiztonsági vagy adott esetben nemzetbiztonsági szerveket, amelyek közbeavatkozásával lehet az adott kockázati tényezőket csökkenteni, és hát erre vonatkozóan meg lehet hozni a szükséges intézkedéseket.
So based on the data that we obtained, we have identified the level of potential security risk, which can be used to identify the law enforcement, national security, or where appropriate, private security bodies that can ensure the adaptation and implementation of measures to mitigate these risks.
Röviden egy mondatban szeretném megemlíteni, hogy ebben a kutatásban még vizsgáltuk a templomok építészetében bekövetkezett változásokat. Nem mind építészeti oldalról megvilágítva a kérdést, hanem továbbra is itt a biztonság és a védelem kialakítása szempontjából vizsgáltuk a templomok építészetében bekövetkezett változásokat.
And during this research, we also examined the changes in the church architecture, but of course also again here in terms of safety and security design.
Vizsgáltuk a keresztény szent helyeknek a védelmi szerepének az erősítését.
As well, we also in our research we examined the strengthening of the strength of the holy places, how to protect them, how to strengthen them.
A kutatás fókusza az a rendészet és a magánbiztonsági szektornak a bevonása volt.
So the focus of the research was to use the help of law enforcement, national security and private security agencies bodies as well.
Itt a kutatásban arra kerestük a válaszokat, hogy a keresztény szent helyek, hogy a rendészet és magánbiztonsági szempontból történő védelme milyen formában valósítható meg.
So the idea was to answer to the form in which the protection of Christian holy places and especially churches could be implemented in terms of law enforcement and private security.
Itt a kutatásnak ezen szakaszába bevontuk a magyar katolikus egyházat is.
We also got help from the Hungarian churches.
Hiszen mindenféleképpen kíváncsiak voltunk az ő véleményükre, álláspontjukra, hogy hogyan látják a keresztény szent helyeknek a biztonsági védelmét.
As it was really important for us to understand their point of view, to see to get some information about what kind of infrastructural changes could be important to be able to strengthen the security of the churches.
És nagyon jó volt ezekről a kérdésekről egyeztetni, és hát Erdő Péter bíboros úrral is történtek ez irányú egyeztetések ezekben a kérdésekben.
So actually we had quite many talks with different representative of the Hungarian Christianity.
És mi azt gondoljuk, hogy mindenféleképpen az egyházaknak a véleményét is érdemes figyelembe venni, meg hát figyelembe is kell venni az ilyen kutatások során, úgyhogy nagyon hasznosak voltak ezek a egyeztetések ezekben a kérdéskörökben.
So all these talks, all these meetings with the different participants of Christianity was really important for us and very useful.
És utolsó részként szeretnénk arra információkat átadni, vagy arra rávilágítani, hogy hol tartunk most jelenleg.
And now, as a last part of this presentation, we would like to highlight where we are at now, and give some idea about the future.
Ami számomra érdekes és nagyon izgalmas kérdéseket vet fel.
What is really important for me and also interesting.
Hogy hogyan lehet itt az építészet és a rendészeti koncepciókat ötvözni, és ezekre keressük a válaszokat.
How can we, so the interesting part is how can we combine architecture and at the same time all these law enforcement concepts.
Igen, és számosan hipotézist ugye felvázoltunk, hogy a keresztény szent helyek közvetlen közterületére olyan építészeti és közteri műtárgyak kerülnek ugye elhelyezésre, amelyek támogatják kifejezetten a rendészeti szerveknek a munkáját.
So our main goal was to be able to prove our hypothesis that direct public space of Christian holy places should be supplemented with architecture public works of art that support the work and at the same time supports the work of law enforcement agencies and as well increases the individual's sense of security.
Szeretném kihangsúlyozni, nem csak a rendészeti szerveknek a munkának a támogatására végezzük a kutatásokat, hanem az egyénnek a biztonság érzetének az erősítését is kiemelt szempontként kezeljük.
And as I mentioned before, so not only the law enforcement agencies are important here, but also to increase the individual sense of security.
Együttesen vizsgáljuk a digitális, építészeti, mechanikai, elektronikai és a fizikai védelem integrálhatóságának vonatkozásában a biztonsági kockázatokat.
So we examined the security risks for the integrability of digital, architectural, mechanical, electronic and physical protection.
Itt egy-két olyan hívószót szeretnék felvillantani, ami talán kicsit kézzelfogható ebbe a témában.
So some words about this area.
Igen, ezek a digitális és online köztéri eszközöknek az elhelyezése, gondolok itt okos padok, okos lámpaeszközök, okos köztéri kamerák, digitális információs táblák, hang- és mozgás alapú segélyhívó eszközök.
So for example, what is important is the placement of digital and online public devices, For example, smart benches, smart lighting, smart public cameras, or voice and motion-based emergency tools.
És visszakanyarodva még a keresztény, tehát a katolikus egyházzal történt egyeztetésünknek a vonatkozására.
And just to go back to the topic when we had meetings with different participants of the church and the Christianity.
Ugye a kutatásunknak a másik megközelítése a keresztény szent helyek, és legfőképpen, hogy a templomok belső terének a biztonságára vonatkozik, hogy azokat hogyan lehet valamilyen formában megerősíteni, és így azt gondolom, hogy a keresztény szent helyeknek a belső terét is egy ilyen biztonsági fókuszba lehet fogni, tehát minél jobban szeretnénk ezt is megerősíteni, és erre a katolikus egyháznak az együttműködésére is számítunk.
So there we had this approach that the church interiors is especially also very important, and we also have to put our focus on to strengthen the security there. And for that, we of course had to be in touch with these different ecclesiastical authorities.
Nagyjából ezeket szerettünk volna elmondani. Látható, hogy ezek a kutatások 2016 óta folynak.
So all in all, that's what we wanted to now present. So these research are ongoing since 2016.
Én nagyon örülök, hogy egy számomra nagyon fontos és olyan kutatásba vehetek részt jelenleg, ami tényleg azt gondolom, hogy előremutató.
I'm very glad to take part in such a research because it is really important for the future as well.
És akár a mai napon, akár korábban is nagyon sok olyan jó elgondolást és nagyon sok olyan jó megoldást láthattunk, ami azt gondolom, hogy itt a közös kutatásoknak egy olyan eredménye válik valóra, amivel tényleg tudunk segíteni a keresztény szent helyeknek a biztonság növelésében.
And as today we had really nice and interesting topics and best practice shared, I do believe that this can be useful for the future cooperation and to find a good solution together.
Én a kutatásokat ugye rendőri oldalról végzem, és mindig a biztonságnak a megerősítésére törekszem, de nagyon sok jó információt kapok itt az építészeti oldalról is, és köszönöm, hogy ezt tényleg megosztják velünk.
So myself, I'm approaching this more from like a law enforcement policing side, this topic, but I gained really good other knowledge from more like an architectural perspective. So thank you very much for that.
Köszönjük szépen, hogy itt lehettünk, és köszönjük szépen, hogy meghallgattak minket.
And thank you very much for that we could participate in this, and thank you for listening to us.
We thank you, Dr. Szabo and Mrs. Wager. Thank you very much. And during your presentation, there was in the chat the question whether we could have a summary. So I will send the Word file that you have sent to us, right? That's okay. That's okay for you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with this, we're moving to Denmark. So this is the last speaker of the day before our interactive session. Mr. Hans Scheving is an architect at Bertelsen and Scheving in Copenhagen in Denmark, but he's also the Chief Security Officer for the Danish Armed Forces Intelligence Service. And he will speak to us about security by design for Danish synagogues. Mr. Scheving, can you hear us?
Yes.
The floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Okay. So all working? Yes. Sorry.
So you need to click on share screen.
Yes.
As you did before.
It doesn't seem to react now. Let's see here. Okay. There you go.
Yes, it's doing something. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for letting me in. I'll try to be brief. We're a bit over time, but as I reckon that I almost literally stands on the shoulders of Vasileios' presentation early on regarding all the considerations to take into account when doing security by design projects. I'll try to stay with some challenges I've experienced by way of two cases. One being protection of the Danish Parliament Castle in Copenhagen, and the other a somewhat similar yet different project for the main synagogue in Copenhagen. And I'll just run into it, and leaving you with the recording afterwards to maybe delve a bit more into some of the points underway as we need to keep speed with this process. At your left is the picture from around 1833, when the present main synagogue was built. It's a historic building. It's listed and protected, and that in itself poses quite severe challenges when you want to reinforce and protect a site of worship like this. And that's to a large point what I'm about to talk more on. But before that, a brief process initiation and background. Both these cases were funded by the Danish government, and one with the Parliament Castle as a user, designed by my colleague Torben Møberg, who is also part of the SOAR group but couldn't be here today. And the second one designed by my office with the Jewish community in Denmark as a user. They were both identified as potential terror targets, and therefore, to a point, changing the layout of how to do the actual design process, because the terror legislation is such that it can set aside some other laws in Denmark regarding cultural heritage sites and stuff like that. But in this case, we tried and hopefully eventually succeeded in actually merging all requirements so as to keep the cultural heritage as intact as possible. That, in short, was due to the very close and very fine cooperation we had with a number of national and local authorities and services and experts. Also considering that we had a very short timeline from initiating the process until completion. In this picture, you can see to your right the castle of Christiansborg, also with the large older church at the right-hand corner, and it's part of the compound, so to say, and it's in a small island covered with governmental buildings and sites of great importance to the nation. So in both cases, we had, when we entered from our side, a client with very highly professional advisors on risk assessment, counter-terror protection, and users also with their own security organization and a very well organized setup in general. And that, no doubt, helped the final results in becoming the way they are. But at that time, no one from the public infrastructure, planning, conservation, and building authorities. So we set aside from day one with amassing a lot of input of sources as a basis for the dialogue. And luckily, we agreed, all parties, that's also the conservation authorities and the planning authorities and tech infrastructure authorities with, say, the police and security authorities of how to project the process, so to say. And that even went all the way so that we, in the initial phases, could start planning what you can see in the picture during the actual building works, where you have a very complex situation, especially if it's in an open, publicly accessible area, of how to actually keep guard while building, because the building site and process in itself is somewhat easily a deterioration to the security situation. But both from military and police, we experienced an enormous help in combining and coordinating closely. You can see one of the foreman's cabins to the back of the special service trooper in front. It's so in Denmark that apart from traditional maintenance works, all other works on a heritage protected building must require a site-specific permit. And that permit, in this case, for both these areas were excavated, so to say, during a very long, somewhat complex, but very fruitful dialogue between security authorities and conservation authorities, with the architect serving as a moderator and a facilitator. And if we didn't succeed with that, we would end up with an end result that didn't take into consideration heritage, culture, the society at the site of worship, and thereby actually making a self-goal in my mind, as seen by the terrorists. The castle is, as I said, located in a small island. It's a traditional rally point for big political manifestations and such. The square in front of the castle, in this case, it's a rally in favor of, or to support the Black Lives Matter. And thus the short brief was keeping the public assembly area and the front of the palace away from harm's way. To begin with, we try to point out historic and aesthetic references in the area at the castle that we could use for integrating with the security project. And on that route, we met a number of other challenges. At the bottom right, you can see the front square during excavations, because it's such a historic place that the archaeologists had to take over the area before we could identify where to put bollards and all the things needed, changes to gradients for security reasons, allowing optimal flow for rescue and evacuation purposes, and actually routes for the police and military in case of an incident. All of that had to be cleared prior to the actual detailed mapping of what to do. The result, seen here in a few pictures, chosen high quality Danish granite that corresponds with lots of the buildings and the surfaces in the area, that could accommodate heavy duty bullets, so to mitigate hostile vehicle attacks, but by even very large lorries in the square at high speed. And it ended up, we in Torben think, much as hoped for, being an inviting place to feel and included, and yet being in clear view, thus creating distance and time for reaction in case of an incident. The synagogue, in contrast, is in a very compressed area of the medieval city, right out to an open public street, with the actual fence you can see in the foreground as the only division between the public street and the listed building. The street in itself offers really no opportunity for hostile vehicle attacks, but drive-by shootings, a lot of other hate crimes, a whole range of various threats could be foreseen. So in short, in this case, the brief was to create an overview and addressing potential armed attacks, addressing the use of access and semi-open spaces. It so luckily happened that in another sense, but quite as with the large palace, we entered a trove of cultural heritage in the Jewish community at the site, and a huge design inspiration. The 400-year-old Torah rolls actually being brought into action in this specific project, and thereby choosing a shared archetype in several religions, the tree of life, to purport in the security process as a token of the intention with creating tolerance and openness. And we did that in close cooperation with the local community artist Shena Goldsmith-Kempinski. How to handle the haste on the street? We needed new secured access points. We needed to rearrange all parking for bikes that used to be just put aside along the fence. We needed to rearrange other street furniture, and thus maintaining the original close relationship between the fence, the open area behind, and the synagogue itself. So one of the tools were to design and use these frame sheets of very heavy-duty BR6 ballistic glass that can take bursts from automatic fire, set in a very solid foundation, of course, after handling some rather complex tech infrastructure below ground. In that process, keeping completely free of the historic fabric of the building while both creating access and shelter. And then using literally the tree of life picture from the 400-year-old Torah rolls on the synagogue's new glass sheets. So it protects from drive-by shooting attempts, and it's coordinated with a setup for events, escape routes, and prepare plans of actions from police, rescue, and military. It's now, when you go behind the screens and see it from the inside out, you can see how it's become an intimate little place for intermissions during concerts. You can stand there, have a talk, a cup of coffee. It's framing a view both ways, and it has a second use as an entranceway when there are large events where the street gates and other locations must be closed because they can't cope with the amount of people. So in that case, the carriage gate where we are here serves as point of entry. And it stays, as I said before, completely free of the historic fabric. Added on is an advanced lighting system built into the terrain, and it is coordinated with the audiovisual system used at the cultural center and synagogue for cultural festivals, events, large worship services at the synagogue, and thus also enhancing the visual shelter for people behind the glass in the dark. It doubles in the sense that if there is an incident and the alarm goes off, light signals will be transmitted so as to make it, besides the acoustic signals, very imminent that there's something going on, and you should divert to escape and evacuation plans. So, as seen from my point of view, there's a hierarchy here, and that's also keeping with what Vasileios told us earlier. First of all, we must establish a necessary level of security. We must underpin, for a number of reasons, the existing cultural heritage. We must back up the social life and the character of the place of worship. We must respect and co-work with the dignity of such a place. We have to take into consideration rather complex user patterns and flows, and we have to then carefully assess and juxtapose the proposed means of actions to make it come out in the end as what is hopefully a complete project in all senses of the word. So that's really all from my point of view. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scheving. Can you click on stop share the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Then I can start sharing my screen again for the last section of today's session. So we're gonna go on to sli.do, and we need to present a slide. Yes, okay, that worked as well. It's also good. So you can all see my screen, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you could either you are still on Slido. I mean, that's from earlier, or you can just go online on slido.com, or sli.do also works, or you can take the QR code from the top here, and then you just add as a code SBD, and then you are in the question of now. And I see you're already starting to answer the question, which is great. So this question is for faith institutions. So not all of you might be faith institution managers or representatives or so on. But the question is, which barriers have you encountered when making a change to create a better security environment? So this would give us a better overview of the barriers. Is it the funding? And I see it is for many. The governance, or is it to gain a planning permission, or would it be other? So I can see here at the top that 6 people have replied. I think we are 30 in the call. Obviously, I'm not participating. So I'm not sure how many are faith institutions. I'm not sure how many people I should rate. What do you think, Gloria?
Let's wait for a couple of minutes. It's the first question for some of the attendees, so let's wait a few seconds, let's say. Anyway, I put the instructions on the chat also, so to connect to sli.do, you should have.
Ah, yeah. So
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So those who have troubles can go on the chat and click on the link there. Okay, so 9 people, but funding is still the main issue, and then followed by governance. Okay, 11. I think at the beginning when we asked for the background of everyone, there were not many faith institutions there, so I think I just move on to the next question. Yeah, okay. So this is again a question for faith institutions. If you have taken steps to improve your security, which measures have given you greater peace of mind or reassurance? So this is a free text one, so you can just type in if you already took steps of improving your security. Like what have you done and what would have given you greater peace of mind? CCTV camera, yeah. It's always a good one. The door, of course. Barriers around the building. Again, CCTV. Oh, thank you for mentioning the training from SOAR. So for those who are with us today and who do not know yet, because the SOAR project offers training in 7 pilot countries, and we also offer risk assessments that are done with our architectural experts. There's a smiley that is thinking. Security guard. Okay, that's probably very expensive though, no? And there it is, the SOAR FE risk assessment. Better management. Active and passive security, yeah. And the highest one are the better management, the training from SOAR, and the CCTV camera.
I think we can go on with the next question.
So this one is for faith institutions and local authorities. What levels of help are available to you locally to improve your security? Like, is there, who do you go to locally if you need help on having a risk assessment or improving your security? Basically, is there help available locally, and are you aware of it? Might have been rephrasing of the question. If this stays empty, then it's going to be very depressing. Okay. Wow, okay. So police and local authority for one person, a lack of support there. SOAR is the first people we had help from, lack of finance. Yeah, the lack of finance was also something we had in our Brussels event. 2 weeks ago, where we said we should organize an event on the different financing tools available. They're okay, police and intelligence service. Okay, not sure what the superhero woman wants to tell us. Maybe you can write what the hero is doing. Okay, so I will move on to the next question if there's nothing more coming here. So still talking about the help, the available help. So is there help available through your faith-based governing advisory body at a national level? Do you know of any national level help that is available for you? Any organizations that you can go to and ask for help? Any helpline? So before we were more talking about a local level, and now it is a national level. Okay, no national support known. So maybe there's a lack of communication between the national level and the actual local place of worship, the community. In France, oh, okay, now they're all coming. Okay, so there is a joint policing committee at the municipality level in Ireland, but the municipal level is not the national level, no. In France, no, SOAR Project provide advice. Zentralrat der Juden in Deutschland, okay. So in Germany, there is, for the Jewish communities, there is a national level, how would I translate that? The council, the Central Council of Jewish for Jews in Germany. Here we have the National Intelligence Service support to religious communities. But then it's not clear to me which country this one is from. The National Intelligence Service support to religious communities. That person maybe can add the country. Ah, okay, that's in Denmark. Okay, thank you. Okay, so in Denmark we have something at a national level. In Germany we have, at least for the Jewish communities, again, police, intelligence, and security service. In France seems to be nothing. In Ireland, we have this municipality level. Okay. All right, I will move to the next question, if that's all right. This one is for our two speakers from the JRC. So if you're still there, Mr. Schumacher and Mr. Karlos, this is for you and any other EU representatives we have on the call and policymakers. Who do you see as the promoted champion of EU security by design standards at a local level? So is there any nation, any initiative, any champion that you know of at a local level? Or is a local level something that you would not know? That you're more focusing on national levels could also be. You are still there, right? There are still Mr. Karlos and Mr. Schumacher. Architects. the SOAR team in Germany. I always love it when you mention the SOAR team, obviously, because that means that this project is really good in helping you and supporting you. Urban designers. Urban planners. Okay, I will move on then. This is again for the JRC and the European Commission representatives, any policymakers on the call. Do you know any specific countries who have structures in place to support their communities regarding security standards? So is there any countries in the EU that are doing better, that we can learn from, that we can use as a best practice example? And there's always differences in the country's implementations. So if there's anybody who does it good, then we can go there and try to learn from them. Anything comes to your mind? So the UK, France. So this is interesting, France by supporting 80%. And we had before somebody saying that there is no support in France. So maybe there is a lack in the communication of this. France again. Certain faith communities would be in which country, the certain faith communities? Partially in Denmark, but they need more implementation. Okay. Then I'm moving on again if there is nobody typing at the moment. So this one again for the JRC, EU representatives, any policymakers, as far as emerging security by design standards are concerned in the EU. Have member states reported any contradictions or issues with local planning and building regulation policy? So when we're talking about European standards, have member states reported any contradictions on issues with local planning and building regulations? Okay, security by design is not a standard. But are there any security by design standards regarding like locks or doors or windows or anything like this, like material standards? Okay, maybe not. More clarity on, I guess the W means EU, like EU level. Only guides, not compulsory. And security by design is not a standard. Sorry. Okay, then let's move on to the next question. So this is for everyone. As far as individual faith institutions are concerned, what is the level of dialogue and partnership with local communities or other faith organizations? Are there any examples of good practice? So I can say to this one, like in the last event that we had in Brussels 2 weeks ago, we were seeing the interfaith communication actually as an advantage, and to support each other in local faith communities. So not that everybody fights for themselves, but they basically team up. So do you know any level of dialogue or partnership with local communities? Any examples of good practice? That would be great to know if you can point us to that. So we have the first one is SOAR, first people to bring people of different faiths together. Thank you. Thank you for that one. On the security issue. We had also in the discussion of the Brussels event, we had mentioned that open days of communities of worship is also something that helps. Many interfaith dialogues thanks to EU projects. Some good practices, indirect in Ireland at municipal level through public partnership, participation networks. Oasis de la rencontre in Strasbourg. So this question is really for everyone. So if you are still 30 people there and I can see only 4 replies, that either means that you do not know anything of any best practice examples, or we already lost you to the lunch, or you're too shy. Okay, maybe I move on then. So again, a question for everyone. Do we believe that full participation and integration into local communities improve the flow of information and foster support? So do you agree with this, that full participation and integration improve the flow of information and foster support? Which basically means should communities participate with each other, be integrated into the local environment? Would this help the flow of information and communication? And I think from the answers before, we saw a bit that there is a lack of information and communication. So anything that helps to support this flow of information. So we have 73% at yes and 27% at partially. Sorry, I should not talk too much. Okay, so we have 15 people here. And that was already our interactive session. And so now I would leave the floor to question answers. So if anybody had any questions for the speakers, and I don't know if anybody put anything in the chat or sent any questions in, then this is the moment. I will maybe stop sharing, right?
I may add a point, if it's okay, regarding the previous comments on standards for SPD. There is presently a very large operation underway in Europe to create standards according to ISO and CE standards regarding mechanical protection and electronics and a wide range of security issues. And it's supported, at least in Denmark, by the security branch of Danish Industry Association. There is a rather large work going on there. Up until now, it's largely been interim standards used in, for example, in Great Britain and in the US. And they have somewhat to be harmonized and transformed into general European standards to work properly, but it's underway.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Gloria, have you received any questions or?
Yes, there's actually one question for Mr. Scheving. So our place of workshop is thinking about improving resilience by undertaking a physical security by design project. What are the pitfalls, and where and with whom should we start the process?
Well, I think to try and put it short, that you need to estimate together with qualified professionals in terms of police or other risk assessment profiles, also from SOAR, what is the actual scope and size of the project. It's mandatory to create the proper kind of process and dialogue, which is so important to the final outcome. Yes. Does that make sense?
It made sense to me, yeah.
Good.
Gloria, do you have any other questions or?
No, we have a shy audience today, probably.
Okay, I mean, it's always possible if you still have questions later on that you just send them as an email, and we can put you in touch with the different speakers. Okay, then I would like to wrap up this session. So I thank you all very much for being here. I have to say it was a very, very interesting session. We had 5 great speakers. So we had Shaukat Warraich from Enhancing Faith Institutions giving us an update on the SOAR project, what has been done in the first year and what are we doing in the second. We had Nicoleta Mirza, who gave us all the figures and research on the current situation in Europe. And then we had the Joint Research Center with Mr. Schumacher and Mr. Karlos explaining the Security by Design toolkit and other advice. We had Dr. Szabo together with Ms. Varga on the Hungarian perspective. And then last but not least, Mr. Scheving from Denmark. I also thank you very much for the interactive session. I think it will give us some input on what are we going to do for the next 3 events that we will have on this topic. So please stay tuned for the next events. And yeah, so thank you very much. And please have a look at our architectural best practice competition and send us your place of worship. So maybe you're gonna win, who knows? Good luck. Thank you very much and have a lovely day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.